Hello everyone. In the last year, I've been intrigued by the world of box scarf, particularly because the last 2 or 3 years, I've been going to tanneries to try and understand leather better because I wanted to behave in a particular way in the shoemaking process. And one particular leather that has caught my attention, and quite frankly, I'm at loss sometimes to understand it even better, is box scarf. It's the one leather that we use the most, but also seems that the information out there isn't complete. So what I'm going to try and speak to you about is the knowledge that I know, and I'm happy for you to fill in the gaps that I don't know about. I'm very curious to learn about leather. So today we're going to cover box scarf as properly as we can. Not just what it looks like, but how it actually behaves, what it feels like in your hand, how it ages, and how to care for it so it gets better with every year you own it. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what you're looking for when you see it and exactly what to do with it. Box scarf is a full grain bovine hide which is chrome tanned and not dyed through fully. What that means is when you have a cross section of the leather, you will see a white line go through the middle of the leather, and the dye sits simply on the top and the bottom, and it's finished with a smooth glazing surface that produces its characteristic semi-gloss sheen. Full grain leather means that the natural surface of the hide is completely preserved. No sanding, no buffing, no hiding imperfections. The entire surface, every pore, every subtle variation is intact. This is the topmost and most structurally dense layer, and it is where all the durability and beauty lives. The hide itself comes from a bovine animal at a stage where the collagen fibers are at their finest and most tightly packed. It's a calf, as the name suggests. Therefore, the pores are smaller, the surface is smoother, and the grain much more refined. This is not marketing language, it's simply a measure of structural difference in the material itself. Two very difficult parts of this leather comes, one at the very beginning of the making and one at the end. The first one is what's called a box scarf tannage, and this is very difficult to understand and therefore replicate for many tanners. And the second part is the mechanical process of glazing the leather, which simply compresses the surface fibers into a smooth, lightly reflective surface. That glaze is not a coating, it's a physical property of the leather itself. Now there's two ways to identify box scarf. One is at the surface level itself, so we got to look really closely to find a very fine grain surface, but that's not the only thing. If you have a chance to see a cross section of the leather, you'll see that the dyeing is not through and through, which means you'll see a white line on the cross section of the leather. But typically on a shoe, you don't get to see the cross section. One hack here is if you look at the tongue of the shoe, it's usually not polished on the back side, so you get to see the cross section or the raw edge of a leather itself. And that's some way you can tell if the leather is box scarf or not, and if it has a white line, that's a suggestion that it does. Now these are not definitive ways to tell box scarf because there are very few ways to. These are just some ways, or probably hacks, you can try to identify it. The sheen is semi-gloss, so it's not a mirror finish, nor is it matte. In direct light it gleams, in shadows it recedes to a rich matte depth. That interplay is central to why box scarf looks distinguished rather than a lacquered finish. So here's something important. Because box scarf uses transparent aniline dyes rather than an opaque pigment coating, you can see the grain through the color. And for this, you really need to look close to the leather to understand what I'm talking about. Because when you do look close, you'll see that sometimes light penetrates through the leather and reflects back, rather than light simply reflecting off the top of the leather. Now, as I'm speaking through this video, perhaps you're able to take a pair of shoe or take a shoe and see the difference between the two, or the next time you go into a nice shoe shop, try to see what I'm talking about, and anyone can tell the difference. There's a three-dimensionality, a depth to it compared to that of a pigment finished leather. You're looking at a painted surface, but with box scarf, you're really looking into the material. The transparency is also why box scarf gets its distinctive patina over time. The leather gets richer. You can build layers of cream and wax. You remove some, you add some more, but all this really adds to the richness of the leather over time, and that's why that transparency is so important in box scarf. Now, the physical properties of box scarf is what really distinguishes itself both for the customer and for the maker. It's firm, but it's not stiff like cardboard. So the important thing here is it holds shape. It holds shape not just when we're making the shoes, so it gives a nice silhouette to the last, which is what shoemakers are trying to do, is try to bring as much of the last shape onto the shoe itself. But then for the customer, it holds shape over time as well. Good leather sometimes will hold shape over the first week or when the pair is new, but box scarf leather really holds shape over years and years of use as well. If you were to put your shoe on a shoe tree, leave it for a day or two for it to rest, you'll find that shoes made of box scarf leather simply come back to its original shape. And that's why it's important for a customer to know the difference between box scarf and otherwise, because here you really get to keep the original shoe not just on the first week of the pair, but for a lifetime. So if you compare this to a softer skin, let's say a Napa calf skin, which is soft, it's drapey, it's nice for the hand feel, but it kind of flops. Whereas box scarf has the tendency to spring back when you press it, you fold it and it creases in a sort of crisp, nice way, but Napa calf skin doesn't quite do that. The firmness is why it is used for shoes, and it needs to hold a nice clean silhouette, and sometimes also for bags that needs to maintain the structure through the years of use. The firmness of box scarf is sometimes what creates the pain point for customers who buy Goodyear welted shoes, that the shoe is hard, it's stiff, but this is really short-lived. Why it's important for us to use box scarf is not for the first few wears where perhaps you need to break into the shoe, is because the shape of the shoe will be consistent over years and years of use. And mind you, it's only stiff when you start off with. Once you wear it, in a couple of days it really softens and molds to the shape of your feet much better. That also adds to the comfort. So yes, there is a break-in period, but on the other side, it holds shape much better, it softens over time and conforms to the shape of your feet like no other leather can. Therefore, new box scarf creases at flex points, the toe box of a shoe, the spine of a bag. Early on, these creases look sharp and harsh, but don't panic. With continued use and conditioning, they soften and blend into the surface. That's the hide conforming to you. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to. One of the genuinely surprising properties of box scarf leather is its resistance to scuff marks. Your shoe already has a little bit of product, be it cream or wax on it. And if it's just surface level scratches, simply by buffing it off with a brush or with your fingers, you're able to remove surface level scratches. Or if it's a little deep, add a little bit of cream or wax again, you're most likely going to be able to cover up those scratches. To water or moisture, chrome tanning gives box scarf a decent inherent resistance, much better than vegetable tan leather can. It's not waterproof, so if it gets wet, let it dry naturally at room temperature and don't use heat. Now, you don't need to be a tanner to understand box scarf, but knowing two things about how it's made will change how you read the material. Firstly, it's chrome tanning. Chromium salts bind to the hide's protein fibers, making them stable and durable. Chrome tanning produces leather that's more moisture resistant and more consistent that traditional vegetable tan leather can't be. It's also what allows the aniline leather to penetrate evenly and make for a good leather. And secondly, the leather is aniline dyed only on the surface and not through and through. This is also what gives it its distinctive, harder hand feel, but a silkier touch at the top. The touch simply comes from the aniline dyes, but the hardness, or what we call the inner hardness, comes from the dryness of the leather that's kept intact from the two layers sandwiched in between. Now compare this to a pigment finish. An opaque color layer is applied to the surface. Pigment leather is more durable sometimes, maybe even more consistent, but it does not develop a patina. The coating wears away over time. What deteriorates is the finish, not the hide beneath it. That's the trade-off, and it's worth being explicit about. Now, the various ways that tanners will work to try and bring a good touch yet have a nice harder feel to the leather so it holds shape over time. You can imagine as if you're turning a few dials to make sure that the balance comes correct, because if you make the leather too hard, it's bound to crack over time. If you make it too soft, it won't hold shape over time. So tanners have to work this balance to try and understand how much to give in for touch and feel on the top versus something to give for longevity and robustness of the shoe or the leather itself. One of the other advantages of good box calf leather is its ability to patina over time, and I'm going to tell you exactly what that word means. Patina is not the leather deteriorating, it's simply the leather maturing and accepting, has the ability to accept levels of cream and wax over time. When you use box calf, several things happen simultaneously. The surface fibers are compressed and polished by contact. Natural oils from your hand work into the grain. The layers of cream and wax you apply build up a thin, translucent film layer. The color deepens, the edges, the high points through a natural burnishing effect. Now, this is not the patina we're talking about where we give color to a crust leather. This is the color that is on the leather itself, be it brown or burgundy or dark, bitter chocolate as we call it. Develop that same color with many different layers of it. That's what gives it its distinct, rich look, particularly over time. Now, new box calf is beautiful in a formal architectural way, but a piece that's been properly used and cared for over many years has a depth and a warmth, a complexity that no new piece can replicate. You cannot buy it. You have to earn it and get there over time. Since box calf is aniline dyed, color choice isn't just an aesthetic decision. It affects the material's firmness and sensitivity and the character of its patina too. Black is the most formal and also the most rigid of the other colors. Dark brown is where most experienced collectors land. It's versatile, the patina is more varied, and you can really play with various color and products over time. Oxblood and burgundy are a little bit complex. You have more tones of red, and pink and purple, so you really get to play around, but in a very specific, more colorful space. And cognac or tans are more sensitive. They show off every defect of the leather much more. Watermarks show easier, and therefore is a little bit more difficult to work with. Now let's put box calf in context by comparing it to leathers that is most often confused with or grouped with. Crust leather is often full grain bovine hide as well, but it arrives from the tannery in a raw, unfinished state. The color is applied by the shoemaker or the patina artist, not in the tannery. You can imagine it almost as a blank canvas for the artist to work on. Another leather that box calf can sometimes get compared to or mistaken for is what's called full grain leather. Now, full grain leather on its own is very good because you're keeping the complete strength of the leather intact by not having to take off anything from the top like corrected grain leather would. Now, corrected grain leather is where you've taken off the top level by simply sanding down all the deficiencies of the leather or the inconsistencies of the leather. In full grain, you keep all that very much intact, but that's not the same as box calf. As I've said earlier, with box calf, it's the tannage process and also the glazing process that give it its distinct shine. With full grain, sometimes that simply comes from layers of wax or other products that are used on the top of the leather, not necessarily on the tanning process itself. And finally, corrected grain leather, where it's sanded, it's coated with pigments, and you'll find this in most commercial products. It's more uniform, sometimes as durable but not always, and definitely does not develop a patina over time. It wears away rather than matures. As someone told me, You wear into the leather, you don't wear out of it. With box scarf, care routine is not optional. If you own box scarf shoes, it's important for you to take care of the shoes, because this is the routine that how patina is built over time. Every step deposits something that makes the material better. And simply the steps are, for me, 3. First, take off the dust, surface level dust from usage. Once you do that, put some cream on the shoe and give it a nice buff. And finally, the third one, put waxes and seal the creams and nice nourishing materials that you've put in the previous step. It's just 1, 2, 3 and you've taken care of your box scarf shoes. The best way to store your shoes is to put it in a wooden shoe tree and keep it somewhere where the shoe can air itself out. Now, if you've worn the shoes in wet conditions, or if the shoe has been fully soaked wet as well, it's not a problem. Put it onto a shoe tree and put it right up on a wall where the sole can air itself out. You need the air to move through the sole, through the layers of cork, into the insole and all the way out of the shoe itself. This, over a couple of days without direct sunlight, will dry the shoe right out. And it's important to use good quality wooden shoe trees, not lacquered, because when you lacquer the shoe tree, it doesn't have the ability to absorb as much as unlacquered raw wooden shoe trees will. This year brings me to 10 years in the shoemaking industry, and only recently in the last 2 or 3 years have I really started to enjoy the leather making part of the business. This is a whole new world of knowledge that I knew nothing about, and I'm just at the tip of the iceberg. It's a journey and I'm out here to learn more. I'm young, I have time ahead of me, and I want to add this to my experience. This is the curiosity that got all of this started. I hope this was useful, but I'd like to hear more from those who have known more than me, particularly the experienced ones who are watching this video. Let me know more in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one.